Thanks very much for staying the course and being here for the last presentation of the day. There's no clicker, so I'm actually going to be behind the podium. I know that's sort of the 101 on how not to do a presentation, so I'm sorry I'm not going to be out there, but we'll get through it, okay? So basically, this evening I'm going to fly through a very quick pit stop tour on how you can harness the emotional intelligence of your teams to increase productivity, performance, engagement. My name is Sabina Cox, and I am Sales and Marketing Manager with Delphi Resort. I've been there the last 5 years, and I also am an EIQ 2.0 facilitator. I am a mindfulness MBSR coach and a yoga therapist as well, just to throw it in. So I spend about 70-80% of my time in my sales marketing role in Delphi, which is pretty full on, and then I spend the other 20-30% of the time working with teams that come to Delphi to develop their emotional intelligence, their strengths, and mindfulness and well-being programs. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. As you can see, I need a business card sort of about this size now to fit that all on, but anyway. Okay, let's just see. Okay, so basically we're going to have a quick look at obviously what's happening out there in HR at the moment, and you know that better than I do. We would say in Delphi, that we're not experts in your industry, but certainly we are experts in team development. That's something we've been doing for pretty much over 30 years at this stage. And team relations and team interactions are pretty typical. Obviously, there's every team has its nuances, and that's where we step in and help you to, achieve that top performance or improve performance from where you currently are. We look at what emotional intelligence is, and again, I know most of you will have, you'll be familiar with what it is, and then just a little bit about specifically how it impacts on team performance, and then ways in which you can work to increase your team's EI, and then just a few pointers really about how you implement an effective EI program, because it is, and again, you're very familiar with implementing programs, there's a lot to it. And in EI, I think it's can be particularly sensitive. It can be personal to people, and how do you develop those type of inner skills, that soft skill side? There's just a little bit, I think, more awareness about how you do that to make it truly sort of effective and results driven. So, in terms of the current landscape, obviously the economy is booming. We are nearing full employment, 150,000 more jobs between now and 2020, which is wonderful. It's all very, very positive for the country. However, for HR, that produces its own challenges. So there is the ongoing hiring, recruiting, retaining staff. This is a big issue for you. And obviously, your culture, and as we all know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. It sort of eats it for dinner and lunch now as well. So, all of these things are becoming more and more important in terms of keeping those the type of employees you want, attracting them, and then keeping hold of them. Developing your leaders and your teams, it's constantly changing. There is more and more focus in terms of the complexity and the agility that the teams and the leaders need. So how do you go about doing that? It's quite complex. And then senior executives, the age profile, retiring in the next 3 to 5 years. So there is, and then not perhaps being filled with the same incoming fresh talent. So again, more and more complex. So, and of course, there's many more challenges that you face in your day-to-day. So, that was a picture of me this morning. So basically, there was a study done personneltoday.com last year, and they found that 61% of HR professionals were feeling the overwhelm, and 94% stated that the complexity was increasing, and only 60%, I believe it was 60%, felt confident that their organisations were in a good position to address the complexity and to move forward. So, it is coming at us from every angle. We're all familiar with the changing landscape of the constantly on, you know, I want it today, I want it yesterday, I want it now. So that's just where you're coming from. So emotional intelligence then, Daniel Goleman, I suppose, would be one of the, would be responsible for making it as popular and I suppose as widespread an understanding of it as we have today. And his book came out in 1995. But emotional intelligence has been around for a long time, and the phrase was first termed actually in 1964. So this whole understanding of our social intelligence as opposed to our IQ has been developing, and it continues to develop at pace. So really it's just, do we recognize and understand our own emotions, our feelings? Can we manage them? And can we relate to other people and understand their emotional states and use that to help us communicate better and inspire and influence those around us as leaders? So I suppose just to say that it is not about just being nice, because, repressing or ignoring emotions, as we know, is bad for our health. So it's not about pretending everything is good when it's not. And likewise, it's not about letting it all hang out either. So when we have a very strong emotional reaction, we've heard of the amygdala hijack. So, the primitive part of the brain kicks in, we're in fight or flight response, and all of the prefrontal cortex processing can be diminished. So our decision-making, our ability to communicate with each other, our interpersonal skills sort of get sidelined, and we can have an overly emotional reaction. So I suppose why we work with our emotional intelligence to develop it is that we can then, in these situations, get a balance where we can express, how we are feeling, but we do it in a way that is respectful and earns us respect, I suppose, as well, so that we're building the bridges and we're building communication. So a little bit just about emotions. Our emotions are information. That's what they are. They're telling us something. So it's about tuning in to our emotions so that we read what is going on for ourselves a little bit better. And I know it wasn't that long ago, because it certainly was in my lifetime, but maybe that was a long time ago, that, you didn't bring your emotions to work. Your emotions were very much compartmentalized, and you came to work and you were professional and you went home and then you could let it all out. So now we're trying to encourage the whole person, and we understand it a lot more. So we know that they are essential in making effective decisions. We talk about the head, so the sort of logical decision making. We talk about the heart in terms of, is this, how is this for me and for other people? How am I feeling about this? And we also talk about, people are talking more about the gut feeling as well. So they're bringing their intuition in, and they're allowing themselves to be guided by all three, which helps us to make better decisions. And of course, they're essential for coping, surviving, thriving, and emotions are contagious. So, and that works both ways, positive, negative. So just to, it's just important that we're aware of that when we choose our attitudes, that does have an impact on our team, and it does have an impact on all of those around us. So Daniel Goleman then, basically within his model of emotional intelligence, came up with the following sort of components of it. And two are really concerned with how we manage ourselves, and two are concerned with how we relate to other people mainly. So the self-awareness in terms of how do we recognize our own emotions? Can we label them? Do we know what we're feeling, when we're feeling it? Do we know our sort of strengths and weaknesses? And self-management then is our impulse control and how we motivate ourselves to get up and keep going, our resilience, that sort of thing. And then the social awareness, the empathy, I suppose, is a really big one. How can we relate to others? How do we understand what they're feeling, or do we understand what they're feeling? And there's a lovely little video, little cartoon short from Brené Brown, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen. And it's just, I just think it's a wonderful little sum up of the difference between sympathy and empathy. And the wonderful thing is, I think the key point for me is, when you start a sentence with at least you still have at least you didn't, that's sympathy. Empathy is just being with what the other person is going through. And then relationship management is how we actually interact with others. What are our communication skills like? Do we use our influence for good? Are we a good team worker? And a bit like what I said about the attitude, do we choose our attitude and choose to show up positively to contribute? And then this is sort of, this is open for debate. There's different figures, there's different statistics depending on who you ask. But it's a generalization that, your IQ is fixed. Well, that's understood. And it's sort of fixed at about the age of 17. And it accounts for about 10 to 25% of what makes us up. Our personality is also relatively fixed. But EQ, although not easy to change, it is a learnable set of skills. Okay, so, and it sort of tends to plateau around the 40s with people. So their emotional intelligence tends to, which makes sense, more life experience. But the good news is you can keep continuing to improve. So why would you need to manage your EI, your emotional intelligence? Well, this is sort of like a little typical project plan and the emotional roller coaster that we can tend to go on in the course of a day or an hour or, a week or a few months. So we're up and we're down, we're having great times, we're having low times, we're frustrated, we're elated, and all of the things in between. So our emotional intelligence, by tapping into it and being more aware, we can start to manage our reactions to sort of level that out a little bit. So we're not getting maybe, everybody loves the highs, but maybe not so keen on the lows. And it really helps us when we develop our emotional intelligence, when we have to give and receive feedback, and sometimes very difficult to give feedback, sometimes if it's constructive, but, seen as negative. And it's very hard to receive feedback as well. And if you have a challenging person at work, that can be difficult. So you can draw on your emotional intelligence, understanding as you develop your skills in this area, and really learning how to deal with your setbacks, your failures, change, all of these things, and bringing up your emotional intelligence will really help to strengthen your ability. So there is a lot of research, and it's becoming more and more so. It's still a relatively new concept in terms of the work and organizational place and teams, but the research so far has been very promising, and it is showing an increase in all of the good things and a decrease in all of the negative things, as you can see there. So just to pull out a couple of key findings. So Daniel Goleman would have done a study in his Working with Emotional Intelligence, his latest book, where they found that EI was twice as important as technical skill as you moved up through the organization. So he would often maintain that IQ will sort of get you the job, but EQ will help you progress in the job. And then another study by Hay Group Research showed that of the top performers, when they looked at what made up that star performance, 85% could be relatable directly to EI, and 15% to their technical skill and their IQ and so on. And then just a couple of little studies that, of course, all have positive results. So the Sheraton Hotel, 24% increase in market share. These were after they implemented EI programs, and they all did it in slightly different ways, but it usually is a combination of classroom and follow-on coaching. Because within emotional intelligence, obviously it is personal, and you need to have practice, and evaluate how you're getting on. When you have when things don't go well, you need to have someone that you can sit down and talk about that through, so that you can learn from those experiences. It's not a one-off shot by any means. So in terms of team performance then, there was some interesting research done by Hilary Elfenbein, and she sort of actually looked at all the research that had been done on team performance from an EI point of view, and she found that it could explain up to 40% of the difference in a team's performance as to their EI scores. So when you look at a team's EI, there's two ways you can measure it and two ways you can look at it. You can look at the collective members' individual EI scores or EI ability, or then you can also look and you can measure how they interact. What are the norms within the group of the relationships that they have with each other. And it's been found that it's important that you have sort of both, because you can have very high EI individuals, but they don't click as a team. And it can be just the way that they're relating to each other. And likewise, if you have low EI, you generally don't have a great way of relating to each other. So you need to up everybody's EI. There is also, studies that show that if you have a very diverse team in their EI scores, that this also doesn't work too well. So if you do have, people who are very emotionally intelligent and then people who aren't so, that can be difficult. So you're trying to, and a lot of EI, what we do can be through our body language as well. So, we're not even aware of what we are communicating. So why a program can be very effective is you're getting everybody at least onto the same page And then from there, people start to understand, okay, this is how we want to communicate. This is why we do it this way. So if that wasn't enough, I now have another 7 reasons why you develop team emotional intelligence that are effective. So more work being done in teams, about 50% more in the last 2 decades, it's been, research shows. Teamwork takes practice and discipline. So again, we all know that, you know, just because you put a team together doesn't mean that they perform well, even though they have more resources than individuals. So what is it that makes a team work? A lot of studies have found, you know, that motivation and the coordination of the team, you know, erode the collaborative aspects of the team. So if you're not getting it right in terms of how you're coordinating and motivating that team, it really doesn't matter how many people or how much resource you chuck at it. So we need to practice EI, we need to practice these things. And if you think about your own teams, how much time do you devote currently to practicing being a good team, working together well as a team? And it's usually very little, but it could be a lot. Are all team members performing? So studies would indicate that, you know, 20 to 35% of value add that individual members bring to a team are coming from 2 to 3% of that team. So you're getting a lot from a few. So I suppose the indicator for us there would be, or the action would be, if we could drive more value-add collaboration from more team members, obviously, where would that bring that team? So we need to understand their strengths and weaknesses, and we need to understand how to motivate the non-performers in the team. And then if you think back to the last time you were really, really angry, really, really upset, really disappointed or impatient, it probably was at somebody else. Somebody else was involved. So emotions are stirred up when we have social interactions, and of course teams are social groupings. So we do get emotionally stirred up, and it's how well we actually manage those experiences will very much indicate how well that team will perform. You know, is it okay to have conflicting views? Can you bring them up? Can you be open in that situation? And this can be very tricky. This is the spot where we deal with a lot of teams in Delphi having a lot of difficulty. Google, I don't know if there's anybody from Google here, but I know they did a project, the Aristotle project, which is well known. And they found that psychological safety was one of the key factors in top team performance. And that is the ability to be able to express in a safe environment. So it's really, really key, you know, trust. That's really what it's about there. And again, most teams are task-dominated. You know, they focus on the task at hand. They don't focus on relationships. And neuroscience would say that, you know, we can either focus on problem solving or we can focus on empathy. We can't do both at the same time, 2 different channels in the brain going on. And I'm not suggesting that we try and do both, but I'm suggesting maybe we look at how much time is our team devoting to the focus, the task focus, as opposed to the relationship focus. And surprisingly, or maybe not, it's been found that leaders, as they progress, lose the listening, the ability to listen to others. They stop mirroring, and they just, you know, and yeah, so I don't know if that's true, but power mutes empathy. So we have this empathy deficit happening as people progress sometimes. And this, when we go back to the Google Aristotle, the psychological safety, you know, how safe do you feel if you're just not being listened to and somebody has no empathy? So as leaders, you know, EI just is becoming, you know, and has always been really, really important. And then lastly, just to get teams and individuals to learn to listen and inquire. So listening, we all do it, some well, some not so well. There is a real skill in learning to listen. And, you know, there's 3 levels of listening. You know, there's the listening to just so that you can reply to somebody, and it's all about me, how this affects me, what are they saying, Then there's the level where you actually listen to what the person is saying and you try and sort of let go of your own agenda. And then there's a level where you actually are listening, you know, you're really tuning in to body language, you're really just being present, and you have, you know, you have no idea where this is going to go, but you're ready to go with it in that moment, okay? And that takes practice. And again, I would maybe suggest that we don't spend the time developing that skill. And then inquiring, again, it's like asking the powerful questions, asking questions rather than feeling the need to always provide the solution. So if we believe that people are creative, whole and resourceful, then by asking the right questions, we get the right answers. We don't need to be providing the answers. I just loved the photographs, so that's why I put it up. But there's a big long-winded explanation or definition of team emotional intelligence. But I think basically it's summing it up, that it's the little things that matter, and it's the ability to have those difficult conversations in safety that are really key. But yeah, the expressions are good. So in terms of your program development then, and again, this would mirror a lot of what the programs that you do develop, but with emotional intelligence, obviously you're providing a clear business case to begin with. You want to know what you want to achieve. And then to assess the individual, ideally from multiple sources. So there's a lot of self-reporting goes on with EI, but especially for leaders, often the 360 is used, and then we use sort of the team one as well. Provide feedback with care. So this goes without saying. We are talking about personal, things that people hold personal to them. So the way that we communicate, it needs to be positive and strengths focused, we would say. Because, when you do an emotional intelligence, say, psychometric test, people tend to, like yourselves, with any psychometric test, you go and look at the negative and you think, oh my goodness, this is where I'm weak, rather than looking at where you're strong. And what we would suggest is that you actually look somewhere in the middle and you work on something that you're going to get a few easy wins on, that you can see an improvement quite quickly. Work to your strengths, and the rest will come along, follow. Help participants set clear goals, and then maximize practice. And this is, as I said earlier, key to getting some emotional intelligence changes ingrained. And that's where sort of Delphi comes in, I suppose, a little bit. And then conduct the ongoing evaluation, and I would say that's really through coaching as best you can. So Delphi Resort then, for most of you, most of you may or may not know who we are, where we are. We're on the Galway-Mayo border in the Delphi Valley, and we're in the business of, I would say, fulfilling human potential. So for the last 30 years, we've had school groups coming out to Delphi. It was an adventure centre and hostel 30 years ago, over 33 years ago now. And it has developed from then to offer team building and team development to corporate teams. We have a 48-bed 4-star hotel on the resort, so we also do couples and family holidays. But a key part of what we do is corporate team building. And a lot of that historically would have been team bonding, where you come and you jump in the bog and you have a great time. But in the last 5 years, we've tried to develop that so that we are now delivering strength scope type team development programs, the emotional intelligence. We do the EIQ 2.0 psychometric testing for teams. We develop a program around that where you get some classroom learnings, some experiential learning, and then some takeaways in the classroom again. So I suppose we would and always obviously value the experiential learning, because if you feel something, you remember something. If you're told something, maybe not so. So that's where experiential learning, that's where we come in, I think. So I'm just going to play you a very short video of Delphi for those of you who may not know who we are. 4 hours from Dublin in a bus, an hour and a half from Galway, 40 minutes from Westport. That's where we're based. So basically, some key takeaways for you today in terms of just promoting emotional intelligence within your own organisations. And again, you may be doing all of this or some of this already, but really we're just encouraging organisations really to look at EI as core competencies and hiring for that as well as the technical skill, and also bringing the EI into the promotional scheme. As I say, hiring and promoting, and then really just model the EI behaviours yourself. So, it's really about educating ourselves as to what it's about. You can take a psychometric test and sort of work from that, or you can just simply, as I say, read a good book, Daniel Goleman, and work from there.